Few affairs could match the excitement of political stagecraft over live television, and Nigel Farage walking into a studio armed with statistics and the confidence of a gladiator in the Colosseum is right in there. This one was less an interview than another verbal chess match, with the hosts hoping to checkmate their rival. Spoiler, not going so well for them.
To be fair, do you not think that people listen to you as a politician, as a campaign? Well, you weren't a politician there, you're a campaigner. Yeah. And do you not think they listened to you and the message they got this would be different? And it hasn't been different, and therefore that puts you in the same place as those politicians who said
I wasn't in charge. If I'd been given responsibility for making Brexit happen, it would have been very different.
But that's an easy get-out. That's a bit like where you are now in Reform, where you're saying, I'm not in charge.
The host tried for the whole of the camera run to off-tilt Farage by starting his questions with an awkward barrage regarding immigration, net migration, and the consequences of Brexit. It was an ambush, or at least supposedly that. But if the host thought Farage would falter in pressure, he would learn otherwise. Farage held firm ground and sturdy walls. This man had the power to parry accusations and counter cold, hard numbers to behold.
2019, in the general election, I stood aside in over 300 seats to give Boris Johnson a free run, to get Brexit over the line and to deliver the promises that he made. The reason on migration that Brexit has failed in the eyes of many people is because the Conservative Party haven't delivered. But be in no doubt, we are in charge of these things. Brexit gives us self-government. That doesn't guarantee success, but it does mean we're in charge.
Now let me talk about numbers. Farage, in true fashion, dropped some bombs. He painted the UK as having become infested with mass migrant hordes and threw around figures that even got seasoned political commentators scrambling for their dailies. The host, of course, attempted to shoot holes in Farage's allegations, but he quickly realised that he was swimming against the tide without a paddle. Every counter-question was rebuffed almost instantly. Farage was not answering the questions, he was just blowing them up.
And inflammatory.
I don't think anything I've said is inflammatory. What I've said is that for 50 years, we had net migration into Britain of 30 or 40,000 a year. That from the late 1940s right up until the millennium. That now, under a Conservative government, net migration is running at 750,000 people every year. For example, we have to provide a new home every 2 minutes in this country just to deal with net migration.
What made this exchange particularly interesting was the relationship between the two people. The host, with her polished rhetoric and experience from years of media, seemed to assume that Farage would falter under scrutiny. But Farage was unshakable. Where most politicians would waver, hedging their answers with what-ifs and maybes, Farage doubled down. Each time the host tried to corner him, Farage calmly redirected the conversation back to his core points. But we shouldn't forget the irony of all this. Farage is quite capable of adding a pinch of humour even into the most heated arguments. His facial expressions and comments aside were more than just comical. They were very much strategic. Every instant the host would appear flustered, Farage's face would seem to show that, is this the best you have?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you talk about a breach of trust, and trust has become one of the very key elements, maybe more so than previous elections this year. You're involved in this trust issue too. You're sort of step aside from the debate, but given your role in the Brexit vote, which was won, and the promises that you made alongside the existing government at the time, there were lots of people making lots of arguments, but you were knee-deep in that about what would change if we left.
The utter lecture the host could only refer to reference to that controversial point of view. The host had painted Brexit as a massive, carnivorous monster that was no doubt going to fail before epic proportions. However, he was not going to get Farage to play along. Instead of going down that route of argument, the story flipped. He was saying that the government had failed to exploit the opportunity that was provided by Brexit, not the fact that they had created the problem. Now that's good, classic dodging, but clean enough with the deftness to make it feel more like a mic drop than a dodge.
Let's fact check this, shall we? What I said in the referendum is we would be in charge. And whether we got things right or got things wrong would be down to us. Now, there was a reasonable expectation that we'd tighten up border controls and that fewer people would come.
The host's frustration was tangible. The more he squeezed, the more so that Farage was composed. And here is the spot where Farage thrives. He thrives on confrontation. While most would buckle under the grilling of where he seemed to feed off each question being an opportunity and never a threat. By the end of the segment, it felt less like they were interviewing Farage and more like Farage was teaching them a masterclass in staying cool under fire.
You'll set out your reforms in the first 100 days, is what it says. And you then go to say it's produced with advice from independent economists, think tanks and advisors. And a moment ago you said you're not about conformity. That just sounds like everybody else. Every other political party would say, we talk to independent advisors, we talk to think tanks. You just sound like everyone else.
I've been called many things over the years, but not like everybody else.
Well, no, I'm
not.
quoting from from Reform. That's what you said. It doesn't sound radical.
The host attempted to draw a picture of Farage as unapproachable. According to him, his policies and rhetoric were far adrift from the average voter's lexicon. That was Farage's wake-up call. Adherence to the increasingly bitter reality that traditional political parties had less and less to offer, and that saved Farage from even remaining at the gate, which he now views as the people's voice.
I've just outlined some very radical proposals. Equally, we don't think anybody should pay inheritance tax until the estate is worth £2 million. We want to lift the VAT threshold to help small businesses. I promise you, what's coming on Monday is...
Agree with him or not, you have to concede. This chap knows how to read the room. He's very exciting, rather because perhaps he mixes populism and pragmatism. Not for nothing is he just mouthing empty slogans. They correspond with data sets. Detractors may call it cherry-picking, but according to Farage, it is called facts. And let's face it, in a political terrain that remains murky, his directness is indeed refreshing. Whether you like it or leave it, you surely will have a treasured time with him. At the end of the segment, it became clear who had triumphed over the other. Farage did not merely win the argument, he dominated the discourse. The host might have entered the studio to expose Farage, but instead, he ended up revealing something entirely different: the weakness of his strategy. You can't outmaneuver someone who has perfected the art of converting every attack into opportunity. The host's moment, however, was not her shining one. She seemed to have intentions of going for something that, as she put it, ended up shooting himself in her foot. A lesson to anyone else who may want to challenge Farage in the future. Bring your game, be on your cool, and never ever have an illusion that he is easy to rattle. Because this confrontation proved to everybody that Nigel Farage does not just survive under pressure, he thrives. In the larger context of political debates, it is one historic debate. Not because it will go down as groundbreaking or particularly revealing, but as unadulterated entertainment. Farage ruined the host, and he did it with a smirk, a statistic, and unshakable determination. Whether you are a believer or naysayer, the man does put on a good show.